Picture this. You're looking up into the vast, dark night sky, right? But instead of just seeing stars, there's this glowing ball of light. It's completely silent, just effortlessly floating over a remote, shadowy valley. Now, your first instinct is probably going to be, oh, it's just a plane or maybe a meteor. But as you keep watching it hits you, this thing behaves like absolutely nothing you have ever seen before. Welcome to our explainer on the Hessdalen Lights mystery. Let's dive in. So, first off, it doesn't crash. Normally, when something drops out of the sky, well, gravity does its thing. But not here. This glowing object completely defies that fundamental rule. It doesn't plummet to the Earth like some failing satellite or, space junk. It just stays up there.
And it doesn't disappear right away either. Think about a meteor. It flashes for a split second, burns out, and it's gone. But this light, it actually sticks around. It lingers, holding on to its glow, stubbornly refusing to just vanish into the darkness. Instead, it hovers. It just sits there, eerily still in the air. And while it's hovering, it can literally change color right before your eyes. Then, completely without warning, it moves. And we're not talking about a slow drift here. It darts away at absolutely impossible speeds. I mean, speeds that make zero sense for anything we currently understand. 40 years, for over 4 decades, this hasn't just been some isolated, one-off incident seen by a couple of people who maybe just had tired eyes. We are talking about thousands of independent eyewitnesses who have stood outside and documented the exact same baffling phenomenon. And all of this? It's taking place in a super quiet, remote spot called Hessdalen, which is tucked way deep within the mountains of central Norway. The whole story really kicked into high gear back in the early 1980s. That's when the local residents realized their night skies were basically being invaded by something they couldn't even begin to explain. Locals started reporting these strange glowing objects showing up in really distinct colors. We're talking piercing white, vibrant yellow, or this bright glowing red. And they were appearing almost every single night. Understandably, this terrified the community. You had some people absolutely convinced they were seeing UFOs, while others figured it had to be some sort of highly classified military experiment. Eventually, these sightings became so common and honestly so undeniable that researchers just couldn't ignore them anymore. Scientists decided it was finally time to step in. They packed up their gear and headed straight up into the mountains to find out what was actually going on. And they didn't mess around. They brought a massive arsenal of rigorous scientific gear. We're talking special cameras, highly advanced radar systems, and a whole array of super sensitive measuring equipment, all set up throughout the valley. Their goal was pretty straightforward: prove that this was a measurable, physical event, and definitely not just mass imagination. And here is where everyone was completely shocked. The equipment actually worked. The radar systems literally detected unknown flying objects up there. The special cameras captured the mysterious lights on film. This was a massive, massive turning point. The hard data entirely validated the locals. It proved that something highly unusual was truly happening right above their heads. So what exactly did these scientists manage to capture? Well, they started documenting downright impossible behaviors. And I mean impossible, according to standard logic and everything we know about physics. Their instruments were recording movements that completely tore up the rulebook of conventional aeronautics. Just think about how this compares to your standard aircraft. Planes move at known predictable speeds, right? They produce loud engine noise, and obviously, they have visible wings. But the Hessdalen Lights, they accelerate way, way faster. They are utterly silent, no wings, and absolutely no obvious power source whatsoever. 1 second, they're blazing across the sky, and the next, they can just sit perfectly still for minutes at a time. But the mind-bending observations don't even stop there. Both witnesses and the scientific equipment have documented these lights literally splitting into 2 separate objects. Picture one solid, glowing orb just dividing itself in half, right in midair, before disappearing. I know, it sounds straight out of a science fiction movie, but this is recorded fact. And incredibly, new sightings of this exact same behavior continue to happen every single year. So, how do we explain the unexplained? Naturally, scientists have proposed a few explanations to try and make sense of all this hard data. Let's take a look at how they're attempting to crack this mystery. The first major hypothesis proposes that these glowing objects are actually a rare kind of natural plasma. Basically, the idea is that specific underground minerals in the valley interact in just the right way to generate these massive floating balls of plasma. It's a really interesting way to ground the mystery in hard geology and chemistry. Now, beyond the plasma theory, there's another hypothesis suggesting the lights are caused by intense electrical activity. This one points to the unique geology of the valley acting almost like a giant natural battery. Then there's a third scientific theory that humbly suggests we might just be looking at an atmospheric phenomenon that is currently entirely unknown to science. And, of course, to be completely impartial, we have to acknowledge what a lot of people firmly believe, that these physics-defined lights are actual evidence of extraterrestrial visitors.
But here is the really crucial takeaway from all of this. No single theory explains every single recorded observation. Even after 4 decades of dedicated study, hundreds of credible eyewitnesses, and tons of rigid radar data, we are still largely in the dark here. It seems like every time a theory manages to answer one question, the behavior of the lights just raises 3 more. Which brings us right to the ultimate question. What do you think is actually lighting up the skies above Hessdalen? I mean, after looking at the radar data, that impossible acceleration, and the way these things literally split in two, is this really just some rare natural phenomenon that science hasn't quite caught up to yet? Or are we looking at something far, far more mysterious? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep digging, keep questioning, and as always, keep looking up.